following is an HCPSS TV special presentation.
Hi, I'm Brian Bassett with the Howard County Public School System. Welcome to HCPS Insight, a live opportunity for you to interact with school system representatives. Today we want to hear from you about the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2017 operating budget. The success of the Howard County Public School System and the students and communities that we serve is a reflection of the tremendous staff and educational resources that we're so fortunate to have. Next year, we'll welcome nearly 1,100 new students into our classrooms, yet this increase is not reflected in the maintenance of effort funding that we receive from the county. It's critical that HCPSS sustains our progress in teaching and learning to prepare every child for a bright and prosperous future. Today's session is designed to help you better understand the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2017 operating budget. We welcome your questions, which can be submitted in a variety of ways. The first is by Twitter. Tweet your questions using the hashtag HCPSSinsight to submit a question. Remember to include that hashtag on your tweet or it won't appear in our feed. The other way to submit a question is by emailing it to insight@hcpss.org. As questions are submitted, we'll do our best to combine similar questions so we can cover as many as we possibly have time for. With me today is Beverly Davis, the Executive Director of Budget and Finance for the Howard County Public School System. Welcome, Bev.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for year 2 of our Operating Budget Insight program.
Glad to be here.
It's exciting. It's not snowing this year. Last year it was snowing. Okay, let's jump right in. And we're waiting for questions to come in. Make sure you get your questions in on Twitter and email. And while we wait for those questions to come in, we'll jump into some of the bigger questions. We'll look globally at this budget.
Okay.
So I think the first question is how much is the total budget request and how much has it increased from last year?
The total budget request is $838.7 million. That represents a $62.4 million increase over last year's budget, which is an 8% increase.
What are the priorities in that request? What are we looking to accomplish with
Great
those increases?
question. This budget is focused on sustaining the excellence of the school system first and foremost. We have an excellent school system and it won't stay that way without continued investment in the school system. That includes investing in our people. We want to protect our people. We also want to continue to enrich and advance all of our students. So those are the 3 main priorities in this budget.
So let's do this. As questions are coming in, let's talk a little bit about how the budget is funded. And we have a couple slides that will help us along the way here. I know slide 4 and 5, maybe we can start with slide 4, but just talk about how the school system budget is funded. What's coming from the county, the state, other sources?
Okay. The school system receives the majority of its funding from the county. The county, in this budget, the request is for the county to fund 71.1% of the budget. The county's funding is determined by the floor level is the maintenance of effort by the state, and then anything beyond that the county funds. 27.6% of the budget is funded by the state. State's funding is per pupil, statutorily determined amounts, so they look at that, and then only 1.3% of the budget comes from other sources.
And what are those? So
other sources would be gate receipts, tuition for students attending non-HCPSS schools, rebates, interest income, summer school tuition, and then any fund balance that's available from the general fund that can be approved by the county council for one-time uses.
So maybe we can take a look quickly at slide 5, and in this slide we'll see some of the changes from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 17. These are the increases?
Yeah, so if we look at the county line first, the county request is $595.9 million. That's a $51.7 million increase over the prior year. And again, that brings the county's percentage of the budget funded up to just above 71%, which is really approximately the historic level that the county had funded the schools at prior to the recession. I think the county's ability to fund dipped during the recession, and we got down as low as 68% of the budget funded by the county in 2012, and the county slowly has been restoring that. Last year we were just over 70%. This year's budget request, the county supports 71% of the budget again. The state's revenue is $231.8 million. That's a $9.5 million increase. At this point, that's an estimate. We don't, and again, we have no control over the state amount. It's strictly formula driven based upon per pupil calculations, which are from our current year enrollment. So we submitted September 30, 2015 enrollment to the state. They take that enrollment, calculate using the formulas, the funding they will give us. They've given us preliminary numbers, but they're not finalized. So it'll be later this winter when we get the final numbers. Some of the factors that go into it, in addition to the straight per pupil, there's a relative wealth calculation. So they'll compare Howard County's wealth as a county to all the other counties in the state and make adjustments in the allocation. Generally, Howard County has seen a small reduction as a result of that because Howard County's wealth relative to the other counties has been higher. And we may see that again this year. We also have specific allocations based on the enrollment in special ed programs, the enrollment in English for second language learners programs. So based on the enrollment numbers, those state fundings are calculated.
So let's step back slightly. In my open, I spoke of 1,100 new students coming to Howard County, projected 1,100 new students coming to Howard County next year. Now, what you were just talking about is that they're basing the funding, the state funding, on this year's enrollment numbers. So are those students that we need to account for in our budget that are unfunded in that allotment?
Yes, and that's really the flaw in the state's maintenance of effort calculation and in their per pupil formula, is that it's always based on the prior year enrollment. For growing counties like Howard County, we won't receive the funding for any of that enrollment growth in the year it occurs. Last year we were the fourth fastest growing county in the state. This year we are the fastest growing county in the state. So it definitely impacts us more than any other county in the state.
So 1,100 students is significant. How do we work around that? They're coming, right, they're coming. So how do we account for that in the budget?
So we absolutely have to plan for those students to be here, which means we have to have teachers for all those classrooms. In the actual enrollment projections go not just the big picture number of students for the year, but also school by school, grade by grade. So it allows us to then determine, using the classroom formulas, how many teachers we need at each school for the number of students expected. And that's where we're able to come up with what are the new positions needed. This budget includes over 56 positions for the enrollment growth alone. That's about $3.2 million for enrollment growth staffing. There's another $500,000 for the supplies and materials that we need in place to serve these students.
Make sure you get your questions in. You can tweet us at HCPSS or hashtag HCPSS Insight, and email us at insight@hcpss.org. Now, I also want to step back. It's January 15th today, the live taping of this. So I want our audience, especially our on-demand audience that may be watching this after the fact, to realize that we're still at the very beginning of this process, right? The superintendent presented her proposed budget on January 7th, about a week ago. And we have work sessions and public hearings, and then the county does the same thing. Correct, Bev? So we're right at the beginning of the process.
We are.
The proposed number that people have heard isn't necessarily the number that will be at the end of this process.
Correct. So the process starts with the superintendent presenting superintendent's proposed budget. We then later this month will have the first, I think, well, the schedule. I'll refer to the Citizens Guide. We actually have both the 2017 superintendent's proposed operating budget and the Citizens Guide to the operating budget posted on our website.
So so they know, this is the document that you have got to go pick up. And you don't have to get the physical document because, like you just mentioned, we've got it on the website, and you can download this, or you can actually click through. We've got, you know, each of the sections broken down on the website with the graphs and the charts and everything that you get. It's phenomenal, and it's what I've used to prepare myself today. And I advise everybody out there watching to get your hands on this, or at least the online version. It's tremendous. Sorry. So that's the sales pitch. There's the advertising.
Well, but I only bring it up because most of the certainly all the general questions will be answered in the Citizens Guide. And all of the high-level information is in the Citizens Guide and in the executive summary of the budget book. Both really great resources for any citizen who wants to be able to understand the budget. The budget book then has every program page detailed out. So for any of the citizens that really want to dig into the details of specific programs, they can go right to those program pages to understand better what that program's purpose is, what the program will be, activities the program will carry out during that year, what the outcomes in the past years have been, some of the performance results of that program, and then what the budget request in the current year is with some trend against prior years, so that it can be evaluated.
There'll be opportunities for the community to provide input. There'll be opportunities during live work sessions to learn more about the budget. And those dates, those sessions can be found online at hcpss.org and navigate to the budget page.
Yeah, so really back to your question, the page 14 of the Citizens Guide provides the operating budget schedule. We're at the midway point in January, and this is our second year of the live stream, an opportunity to get some questions from the community. We have a public hearing at the beginning of February, followed by 4 work sessions during February, when the board will hear from performance managers from each program and be able to ask questions, both their own questions and then questions that the community submits to the board members. And really dig into the details of the budget, and then the board will, based on the work through those work sessions, the board is scheduled to adopt the budget February 23rd. At that point, we update the budget for any changes the board has made, and then submit it by March 11th to the county executive. The county executive will then, excuse me.
It's warm in here, so our audience knows it's warm in here.
The county executive will then incorporate our budget, make any of his changes into his budget request that he submits to the county council. Then he'll hold public hearings in April, and then we'll have work sessions with the county council. And then at a certain point, the county council will adopt its budget in the end of May. Then once the county council adopts the budget, which will include the board's budget, it will come back to our board, and our board is scheduled May 26th to approve a final budget.
Okay, good, thank you. So let's jump in and talk about how the budget is being spent. And we have a slide for this. If we could pull up slide 6 and just give us an overview of where the money is being allocated in this budget.
Okay, great. So again, the total budget is $838.7 million. Of that, $671 million goes directly to instruction and teaching materials. And then only 11% or 92.3 million goes to the operation and maintenance of our facilities, and that's a critical investment each year. 5% is directed towards transportation for our students, at 41.9 million for transportation, and then the central office support or administrative support is 4% of the budget.
So that 4% is central, that's salary? That's staff?
That's salary, staff, any of the cost
Okay.
of supporting central support.
And that 80%, the instruction, that's teaching staff, that's school-based staff.
Correct.
Okay. And now we can even break this down further with slide 7, right? We can break this down to find out where each dollar is going from our budget. And this is interesting to me. I like this.
Yeah, I think putting it into layman's terms for the citizens, just looking at for every dollar spent, where does it go? So 80 cents of every dollar goes directly to school staff and teaching materials for our students. 11 cents goes directly to the facility operations and maintenance, keeping our buildings in pristine condition for our students and staff. 5 cents to transportation and 4 cents to central office support, among the leanest in the state.
So with every budget cycle, we have different challenges. What are some of the challenges that we face in this budget?
Well, I think one challenge is funding, with the enrollment growth needs and trying to sustain the excellence of our school system. I think we also have challenges with the changes in our student populations. When we particularly look at the changing demographics of our students over the last decade, some significant changes. Looking at ESOL alone, if we look at a 5-year trend from 2010 to 2015, we've seen a 12% increase in ESOL students. We have over 2,300 ESOL students in our school system today.
And there's just different funding that they require for different initiatives and programs and staffing, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have to provide throughout the program, and I think we'll talk about a few other areas where we have demographic changes that require us to direct resources to ensure success for every student.
Yeah.
So we've seen a 43% increase in our farm students from 2010 to 2015, with over 10,200 students qualifying for free and reduced meals, a marker of poverty. That is, that equates to 1 in 5 students in our schools today. We have seen a 19% increase in homeless students, with over 550 students that are homeless. Many of those students go school to school, change schools more than once in any given school year. So the supports we need to be able to provide those students to ensure their success are embedded in our budget.
How about for new construction or maintenance of buildings?
Well, this is one of the few years where we don't have a new school opening. So there you won't see any cost to open a new school. Any year you open a new school, there's even more costs involved. So we don't have any new staffing positions in operations or maintenance. Generally, it would require new positions as well in those areas. However, it's critical that we continue to invest in our the maintenance of our facilities and in the daily operations. I think when we look at the budget for those areas, and I'll try to turn to it because I don't want to misspeak on the amount of budget. And I think this is on page 21 of the executive summary in the budget book. Our operation of plant category is $44.5 million in the budget, and that has a 5.3% increase over the prior year.
Okay.
And our maintenance of plant is $27.9 million, a 3.3% increase. And again, that is everything. That is all of the staff and services at the schools for custodial, keeping our schools clean, keeping the grounds clean. We have beautiful grounds and facilities that not only our students and staff use every day, but our community uses throughout the year. We have the funding in this budget to continue to maintain them.
In last year's live session that we had, we first used the term zero-based budgeting. And so talk a little bit, remind us what zero-based budgeting is, the change that's had on our processes. And now we've had a year in our zero-based budgeting process. Talk about the impact that that's had.
Sure. FY2017 is actually the third year of zero-based budgeting.
Okay.
So, which is great because we've got a 3-year history of results with it. And each year we're able to incrementally improve the process that we go through. And it's really a 4-step process. We start with having each program manager, so it takes the budget as a total, so it breaks it down by program area. We use programmatic budgeting. So by program, in each program we ask the performance manager in charge of that program to start by identifying what are the key activities of this program and how do they align with Vision 2018. We want to ensure that every activity that we carry out throughout the school system is aligned with Vision 2018. That's how we reach the goals established for our school system. So they start by identifying how their activities align. They then identify what are the resources they need to carry out those activities. And that's where the zero-based comes in. It starts by saying you can't just take last year's budget and add to it. You have to say, here's the activity, here's the cost, or here are the resources I need to carry out this activity, and here's the cost for those resources. That's what they have to submit with their requests for the budget. They also, we ask, and we're in our 3rd year, so this is year we're incorporating much more of that, is the performance measurement piece, because it's sort of what are you doing, how does it align with what we say the community has said it wants to have done in Vision 2018. What does it require to be done, and then what are the results you get from this program? Because we're asking the community again to invest in each program. And so the community deserves to have information about what have been the results. That's the performance measurement piece. So this year's budget includes more performance results in each program page. We're not at 100% yet, but each year we've added more and more programs that have completed that. The entire instructional area has established targets and are now tracking results to be able to report on them. So that's a really exciting improvement in this year's process. So that's just the process of it. What it allows us to do then is prioritize the requests in alignment with Vision 2018. And when we're prioritizing those requests, a few things in terms of generating savings. So the great outcome is we're ensuring everything we do is helping us to achieve the outcomes the community supports in Vision 2018. But from a budget standpoint, we're saying, and we're going to make sure we're using the dollars as wisely as possible. So we're balancing requests against meeting the goals in Vision 2018, and we look to either in each year where requests are made that we say, well, that doesn't quite achieve the outcome for the investment, so no, that's not going to move forward as part of the request. So there are items that are excluded from the superintendent's proposed budget that were part of what came forward. And then there are also amounts that are where performance managers are redirecting resources. So, okay, last year it was used for supplies, and we have identified a new activity or a purpose this year we want differently. So we're going to find money within our own program to redirect to this purpose. And that's a significant savings as well. So when we look at FY15, we saved $10.4 million between the two, the amounts that we excluded from the request and then the repurposed or redirected resources in the prior budget that were redirected to a new purpose in the request. In FY16, it was $10.2 million. in FY17's budget, again, we have $7.6 million in savings. When we look at FY17 in particular, we have $3.4 million in savings from excluding requests. There were over 35 position requests that we said we can't support at this time. And again, it's already a large request, and we know that. And we know it's not an unlimited pot of money. So, you know, those difficult decisions are made at that point. We also redirected over $3 million of the FY16 budget to new purposes in FY17. In both FY15 and FY16, there were a number of positions repurposed. The FY17 budget, while we were able to redirect $3 million, it was from other areas. We did not repurpose any positions this year. In FY17, we also have $1.2 million in savings from the early retirement program.
Right. Let's jump to negotiated agreements. How are we able to prepare a budget when negotiated agreements perhaps aren't finalized yet?
So historically, the superintendent's proposed budget would not include any placeholder for negotiated agreements. And the board would, depending on the year, I'm going to have a difficult time with my throat today. By the time the board approves, they may or may not add funding in depending on what the funding picture looked like from the county as a placeholder. And at some point, we're in negotiations now, and every year at this time, negotiations are underway, generally, unless it's a multi-year agreement. We don't currently have a multi-year agreement, so we're in negotiations. Okay. Last year, the budget was finalized prior to negotiations being finalized. So there were no funds in the FY16 budget for any salary or adjustments from the negotiations. Negotiations were finalized in June after really finalized and then really approved by the board and signed in September. So we had to, last year an increment was negotiated, an increment, a mid-year increment. So the increment took place mid-year this year. The impact on the FY16 budget is $6 million. Because it wasn't negotiated prior to the approved budget, there wasn't any funding in FY16 for it. We had to find the savings within the FY16 budget to pay that $6 million. Most of that savings actually came from the first year early retirement savings of $4.6 million. The other savings were working to find in the current year budget. But that entire increment becomes an increase to the FY17 budget. So we start FY17 with one of the impacts on the FY17 budget is $12.7 million for the FY16 negotiated increment. In FY17, the superintendent has, for the first time in Howard County, included a $13 million placeholder for negotiations. So while negotiations aren't underway and we don't know what will be negotiated, there is a placeholder of $13 million in the budget for that at this time.
Along similar lines, last year we talked a lot about the pension shift from the state to the county. What impact has that had? And I believe last year was a partial shift and this year completes it.
So the pension shift actually started in 2012. Prior to 2012, the state paid all teacher pension. So none of the local school districts had to pay and had to fund in their budget any pension costs for the teachers. In 2012, the state passed a law shifting that to the locals. From 2012 to 2016, they had statutory amounts that were being shifted. So we knew in law exactly how much was being shifted each year, and from 2012 to 2016, that shift each year had to be funded by the county government as an additional component beyond the maintenance of effort required level of funding. So while there was a shift, we really didn't feel, we felt it in the sense that it was money that we certainly felt it because it's money that the county couldn't direct to the school system for other uses, but the county had to fund it. Beginning in FY17 is the first year that school systems throughout Maryland have to fund the normalized cost of the pension, which means the entire increase from the prior year to the current year. And that increase is calculated and determined by the state. They provide us in the late fall with the amount that we will be invoiced to pay them for the pension. For us, it was over a $6 million increase in FY17, and it's not an additional component of county funding above MOE. So it's absorbed as part of our budget this year. So FY17 is probably the most significant impact of the pension for the school system. When we look at the total impact, we're up to $23 million in pension cost in our budget that used to be funded by the state.
Is the money still, is the funding still there? Is our budget do they just filter that through the county? Are these additional costs that we weren't anticipating, or is it being funded similarly, just we're provided the money a different way?
I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. So we know the amount we paid last year.
Yeah.
It was about a little over $17 million was the cost of pension. The state sent an invoice letting us know it was going to be just around $24 million or $23 million this year. So once we get that, and we have to budget, so within our fixed charges budget and part of our benefits and fixed charges costs are the entire $23 million. Of that, 6 million plus change or increase from last year to this year, we have to absorb as part of our budget within the funding from the state and the county. Mm-hmm. So it's part of our total expenditure costs that we include in our budget.
We have a question from a parent, and this one's near and dear to you, I know. I'll ask it as it was proposed to us. I say a parent, a community member. Dr. Foose attributed a savings in the budget of $7 million to utilizing the Workday system. What is Workday, and how could we achieve such savings?
Oh, very good question. Workday is a new enterprise system, so it's first and foremost a human capital management system. So it will replace or it will serve all of the human resources, benefits, payroll, services for the school system. It also has finance modules or work streams within it, so it will also provide all of the financial reporting, procurement, expense reimbursement, all of those functions. What's exciting about Workday, it's a cloud-based service, so we're always on the latest version of the software. We're actually scheduled to go live later this spring for the HCM components, human capital management components, and then July 1st for finance. It automates so many of our manual processes today. There are many areas where we're really behind the times with paper processes, and those paper processes have a cost.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the calculated savings from automation of inefficient processes that we identify the savings over the life of the project.
So I won't have to fill out my yellow slip anymore and hand it in and get the carbon copy and
no more triplicate copy. It will automate. I mean, we are still on paper timesheets with triplicate copy that are driven around the county to all of our locations and driven back every 2 weeks. So it will completely automate and have timekeeping online. It'll have all leave requests online with automated workflows for approvals. It will,
great.
yes, it's very exciting. Employees are going to be very excited about the improvements they see and the time savings they see in their own time.
So, and so when we talk about cost savings, we're looking at the cost of purchasing and printing a lot of the paper methods that we had, paper processes, as well as I would assume there's a cost associated with time, people's time.
There absolutely is. There's the being able to implement a system that has the controls and the automation to help us ensure accuracy of timekeeping will, in and of itself, generate savings. I mean, there are studies that prove it, and that's part of what was used to calculate the savings.
Okay.
There's also just the process time of people's time, our employees' time that is spent on manual tasks that will be automated and be done in seconds that used to take time. So obviously that time will be redirected to better use.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to help me with what is maintenance of effort and how is the county's maintenance of effort funding calculated?
Maintenance of effort is state law for all of the local governments setting the minimum level of funding each year that they must provide their local education agency, their school system. And it is...
That's statewide?
Statewide.
Does every
So it's
county have the
within
same number?
No,
or they calculate it for each county?
It's calculated based on your county, so it's a per pupil calculation.
Okay.
The same methodology and approach is used throughout the state. So we use the same exact methodology, but the numbers are different based on your county. So it's a per pupil number. And it starts with it does start with the prior year level of funding and calculates a per pupil amount, and then it adjusts for the enrollment. Again, we did speak earlier, it doesn't adjust for the projected enrollment in the next year. So for growing counties, it doesn't include funding for that expected growth.
What about state funding? How is state funding calculated or determined?
State funding is, again, in state law, it's formula driven, and it's similar in that there are per pupil calculations. It's actually very complicated calculations, not very simple, and they're about...
And math's not my thing, Bev, so don't confuse me.
Yeah, there are a number of buckets of state funding. So in our revenues line for the state, there's probably about 6 line items, foundation revenue, and each line has some nuances to the way the state calculates it. And there are factors, again, I spoke briefly earlier about the wealth factor that is used to adjust funding, and then it's enrollment driven, so it's based on the number of students that we report.
Bev is the Executive Director of Budget and Finance, but I still want to ask you this question. It's not a budget finance question, but it's coming anyway. The expected enrollment growth of approximately 1,100 students, what kind of impact do we see that will have on class size and programs that we offer?
So it doesn't change class size per se. Class size is approved by the board. And the challenge for school administration is to, one, anticipate and that's where the enrollment projections come in. Again, I spoke briefly earlier that we project not just as a system-wide, but by school, by grade, tracking cohorts, and we could probably spend a lengthy time talking about that methodology and how it's done. But then school administration has to identify the right resources and then make the adjustments. The work they do is amazing in terms of evaluating when we actually open school, how many students show up at each school, because we've done it based on projections and they've staffed, then they have to make adjustments. Our instructional budget includes what we call pooled positions, and those are positions to adjust. So if, as we identify schools that need another teacher so that we can have classes within our board-approved class size, they have a position to pull from to assign and hire a teacher to do that.
Okay. So we have about 20 minutes left. If you'd like to jump in on this conversation, make sure you do so on Twitter using the hashtag HCPSSinsight or email address insight@hcpss.org, and we will be happy to answer your question. If you don't get it in time, you can still email us. You can still contact us through Twitter, and we will respond to your question. Good? So we covered this briefly earlier, but maybe we can bring up slide number 3 and reiterate this. The trends that we're seeing for students that receive free and reduced meals and the costs associated with those trends. And here's slide 3 that we can use for this. Talk a little bit about that impact on the budget.
Well, we spoke, I guess, briefly earlier about the increase in ESOL students in particular. If we look at the positions requested in the current budget, we have positions for liaisons, for Hispanic and BSAP community liaisons. And I think those liaison positions help support these changing demographics specifically. By no means are they the only resources directed to this, but that's one I know I can point to that is clearly reflects adjustments in the budget to respond to this. Throughout the instructional curriculum, there are resources directed for interventions and supports, and many of those are in response to the shifting demographics. And again, it's to ensure that every student is successful. We need to meet each student where they are and provide the supports they need to succeed.
And when we see a number like that, a 43% increase in a 5-year span, I mean, that's significant.
That's very significant. It's 1 in 5 of our students may be coming to school hungry, which makes it harder to learn.
I heard Ms. DeLacy speak to this last night. Maybe we can bring up slide number 1. But talk about the economic value or the impact that HCPSS brings to the Howard County community, and how do we know this?
There was the report issued, I think on the January 7th by Sage Policy Group. It was commissioned, and it great economic data by Dr. Basu really showed that for every $1 invested in our school system, there's a $2 return on investment. Our school system helps support over 13,000 jobs in our community, and it contributes to $1.85 billion in the local business sales. So we have a significant positive impact on the community. The report in detail went through a lot of detail on the positive correlation between test results and home value. And I think most citizens in Howard County, among the reasons they move here is for our school system. And then our citizens who may or may not have children appreciate the fact that their homes' values increase. They not only retain their value, but they increase in value, really attributed to the excellence of our school system.
I want to make sure everybody knows how community members can get involved. We talked earlier about the process moving forward, and that can be found here in the guide, Citizens Guide. Make sure it's on. You can take a look there in the back of that this publication. You can also provide input to the Board of Education using the email address boe@hcpss.org. You can provide feedback to your office, to the budget office, using budget@hcpss.org. You can still use the Insight email or hashtag as well, and you can speak at the public forums that both the school system will host as well as the county. So we encourage everybody to be heard and be involved in the process. And we talked about resources being found online and in this document. And if they want, they can download the big behemoth there that you've got. It's weighing our table down slightly, your notebook, or your budget notebook. It's leaning that way a bit. Let's talk a little bit about Bright Minds Foundation and how their budget impacts, how it impacts our budget and how it impacts our initiatives and what we're able to do. What role does Bright Minds play in this process?
So Bright Minds is an educational foundation that serves our community. It is a separate entity from the school system. They do provide an annual report to the board, so anyone who really wants to see their audited statements can refer to that board report. I know it's posted each year on board docs when it's presented. Our budget includes, the FY2017 budget includes $15,000 that will be provided to the foundation to support their operations. I think in the early years, the operating budget included $20,000. So it's not a significant cost to our budget. We really provide a small amount to help support administration for them. Okay. We also have our partnership office available to collaborate with the staff at Bright Minds. And clearly they want to work in unison with us in terms of the efforts they have in place. I think the foundation's efforts are to try to supplement areas that may be beyond what the school system provides. So for instance, they have over the years, I know they've received donations of computers, and they've worked to provide those computers to students in need who may not have computers of their own at home. So those were computers that were donated and given and then provided to those students. They have offered, I think, some scholarships and grants to teachers for different programs they may want. They've provided some funding for after-school programs that are not part of the board's operating budget, but are programs that the Bright Minds Foundation has seen as valuable to the community and our students, and they support.
But they're not funding any salaries or any sort of compensation to employees or others.
No.
Right. Okay. You know what, Bev? I'm out of questions. We've got our questions in. We've heard from the community, and we'll give another minute here if anybody else would like to get in. HCPSS Insight is the hashtag, or insight@hcpss.org. Bev, I'll give you an opportunity. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we covered? You've done a terrific job, first of all. So if there is nothing, I understand, because we've covered a lot in this session.
Well, I just encourage citizens who have interest to submit their questions to the budget office, to the board. We clearly, our goal is to provide, I think, and really I actually encourage citizens to spend the time to read the Citizens Guide, to read through the executive summary. We try very hard to provide the information that will make the budget easy for a citizen, a general citizen, to read. We try not to make it budget speaky or accountant speaky, something that a general citizen can read and understand what's happening with their tax dollars. And we want to work with the community as best we can to be as transparent and collaborative in the process as we can be.
Great, and you've done a marvelous job of doing that today. Maybe Terry, before we leave, Terry and Mike could bring up slide number 9. And I just realized that is the link. That's how people can access the Citizens Guide directly. And thank you guys. And in the back of that, on page 14, is the operating budget schedule moving forward. So everybody can take a look at that, participate, be a part of the process, have your voice heard. We want your input. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Terrific. And that's all the questions that we have time for today. I'd like to thank all of you who joined us and submitted a question. And thank you to Bev for providing the Howard County community with the information they need to better understand the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2017 operating budget. Finally, thank you to the outstanding team of people that we have working here behind the scenes of HCPSS Insight. I encourage you to read our online Citizens Guide to the Budget at hcpss.org. So on behalf of Beverly Davis and everybody who participated in today's HCPSS Insight, I'm Brian Bassett. Thanks for joining us.